Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the final half hour of Green Rush Live, our regularly scheduled business of cannabis talk show here on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and I haven't reminded you, but please like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, not just Green Rush Live, and also support people like Josh Kincaid and his Talking Hedge podcast, and like Thomas Howard and his cannabis legalization news too, because we're all in it together. Right, Josh?
That's right, Jimmy.
All right. And speaking of someone who's in it together, an accomplished author, an accomplished athlete, his name is Tarris Batiste. And Tarris, thank you so much for joining us. He wrote this book, guys, and it's called Don't Let It Smoke You, Creating a Non-Toxic Relationship with Cannabis. Tarris, first of all, welcome to the show. Why did you write this book?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on the show. I'm happy to be here. Seriously, thank you for making this happen for me. And why I wrote the book. So in the short, I wanted to do both. I wanted to be able to use, but not let it control me and be who I wanted to be. Didn't see anybody doing it at the time that wasn't fitting the stigma. That's why I didn't see anybody doing it at the time. So just put all that mess into a message and wrote about it. And that's what came out the book out.
One of the neatest things, now I read the book, one of the neatest things that you did for research is you sought out people who were, if we're pro-cannabis, you sought out people who had a different view of the plant medicine. What motivated you to do that?
Exactly. I wanted to hear both sides. I didn't want to be so much pro. I wanted to hear both sides, from the Nancy Reagan campaign, the multi-million-dollar campaign that kind of took over everywhere. So I went to go speak to Carla Lowe out in Sacramento, and that's where I got the information from. And she brought her team in, and they just dumped a bunch of information on me. So it was good. It was helpful.
So you've seen both sides of it, but this plant was part of your life since age 12 when you were introduced to it, typically through what I would consider to be peer pressure. You're comfortable with that, right?
Yeah, peer pressure, more of just environment. Let's just say that. Environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you grew up in Georgia.
I grew up in Georgia. I grew up in North Georgia. Went to Cass High School, to be exact. That's where my family is, and just kind of moved and went to Indiana from there. Yeah.
And, when it says, and again, there's a theme in here that is something I am very much conscious of. And it's a question I asked a guy named Dr. Peter Grinspoon about. He's the son of the late Dr. Lester Grinspoon, who wrote the book Marijuana Reconsidered in, I think it was 1970. He's a Harvard professor. And the question I asked him is, how do you tell the difference between an addiction and a dependency? And how you love this, right? And how do you become not dependent on a product that you enjoy? And I was talking more about caffeine and coffee, because 91% of Americans have a cup of coffee every single day. That to me is a sign of addiction, because if you're not on it, you get a headache, you don't feel as right, we don't focus as much. So now relate all those things to don't let it smoke you.
Yeah. So just to kind of unwind and talk about the first part. Yeah. I don't know if I have enough knowledge just yet to talk about the difference between an addiction and a dependency. Okay. Right. I'm just going to be completely honest about that. But kind of from there, I could tell you what I was dealing with, right? So going through high school, going through college, I was kind of using just to use with friends. And then it kind of went to college around pain management and kind of my own self to kind of relax and suppress certain things. But I felt so good when I was using it, but my coach said it was bad, right? My parents said I shouldn't do it, right? Society said it wasn't the right time to do it at that time, but it made me feel good. So I didn't really understand. My message was kind of mixed in my head. I didn't really understand what was what. So that's why I went out to go do the research, to listen to other people, to kind of talk about it. Made me feel normal, right? Like, hey, you can love cannabis. You're okay. You're going to be successful. If you love cannabis, you're fine. So that's why I wrote the book. That kind of speaks to the book. And that's why I was dealing with my dependency and the issues around that.
Now, you were, another part of this book that I read is you got a call from a high school football coach, and you went in and you talked to that team. And then I love the little anecdotal story you told about going into the bathroom. Yeah, walk us through that story, because that was, because I really think that was a perfect example of the power of an athlete who can relate to other athletes
Sure.
and gain immediate respect because of who you were.
Sure. I think so. First, I talked to McEachern High School out here in Georgia, a big, phenomenal high school out here in Georgia, known for athletes. The coach let me go in there, had the opportunity to speak with them. You know, I think the message sits with athletes so much because we're so like, get better, move forward. The sky is the limit. And the book's not telling you what to do. It's just saying, hey, if you feel like this is getting in your way, if this feel like something, this is an anchor in your life that's kind of holding you back, you know, just suppress it to a side and move forward. So that's the message that kind of went to the athletes. To get to the story, right after I spoke to the athletes, I went to the bathroom to use the restroom before I left and went home. Heard the kids kind of going back and forth, making jokes around it. Heard a younger kid tell an older kid, hey, do what you do, just don't let it smoke you. It made me smile. It made me feel like it sat with them, and it's going to sit with multiple groups moving forward. So I love that. I love the message. I love how it doesn't tell people what to do, and hopefully it resonates with a bunch of people out here.
Well, and I'm going to give you credit. You poured your emotions and your feelings out into this book. And as someone who's probably, I think I'm close to twice your age, I always have had problems expressing my emotions to loved ones or to people in relationships or whatever. And I've learned that that's not a good thing, that you really do need to share not only your feelings about your use of cannabis, but also just how you feel at that moment in time. And I'm not saying, well, I feel high. No, I feel I'm a little perturbed that I wasn't included in that conversation. Or it really bothered me when you introduced everybody in the room, but not me, or something like that, right? How difficult was it for you to share your emotions for this book?
Very, 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 very difficult, especially with my siblings at that time being against it. But society was coming so legal. Like, I remember going to West Coast, going to UCLA, playing with some athletes out there, and they would use all the time. And then I would go to Indiana, and they were like, no, you can't do it here. So, you know, it was kind of ups and downs for sure, kind of all over the place. But society in the world was bridging it, and so was the message. So I felt like it was the right time to let it out to the world, for sure.
Yeah. Josh, I know that you have not read the book, but I think you're familiar with the story, if you will. If you've got any questions for Tarris, I'm just going to put you right on the spot. Go ahead.
Yeah, very, very similar to a lot of other athletes. I was friends with Cliff Robinson, rest in peace. He was with the Portland Trailblazers. I spoke to Ricky Williams last year, who both players in the NBA with Cliff Robinson got, I think, busted at least 6 times. Ricky Williams ended up just walking away entirely from the NFL, and that's because, like you mentioned, the difference in the messaging, right? They felt good. They knew that was prolonging their athletic abilities. And yet the institutions that they worked for said, no, not going to do it. And when we look at the MLB, predominantly white, they don't test. National Hockey League, predominantly white, they don't test. The NBA, predominantly black, they don't test. So I don't know if it's racist, but why is the NFL so slow to adopting these principles?
Well said. Well said. I don't have that question, but I'm glad you brought that up. Great point.
When you were in the NFL, was the culture a lot different? I would imagine people were keeping it secretive, but did you find that the majority were using?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody used in their own way. And that's across all sports arenas, right? But speaking to the industry that I was in, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it isn't about the testing is not the reason why the testing is well known in the sports community is because they don't want to let their teammates down more than anything else. It's the people in the locker room that it's really their family. Am I speaking out of turn here, Tarris? I mean, I've been in a few of these locker rooms.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
And yet the league does take advantage of its athletes. And in fact, the biggest league that takes the most advantage of its athletes is the game of football.
Yeah.
It just is, guys. Look, if you've read up on how damaging football can be to you later in life, and the development of these proteins in your brain, the CTE, that can impact your life to the point where you're not the same person you were 30 years ago when you were playing the game. And the fact that now you got me going on sports, the fact that there's non-guaranteed contracts in the National Football League, except when you are an exceptional athlete like Deshaun Watson, who is going to be able to play football this year at 6 games, right? They're at 17 now. He got an 11-game suspension for multiple poor conduct, bad decisions. It was a really awkward situation that he put himself in, and now he's paying for it. But people have to understand, he still has $45 million in guaranteed money because it was part of his bonus signing with the Browns.
For sure.
How big a punishment is that? Tarris, men behaving badly is not just related to sports, correct? It just gets magnified more by sports. You agree?
I agree. Just being in that spotlight, or being in those type of shoes definitely gets magnified. Josh, you brought up something about, cannabis in the NFL that made me start to think a lot. And just to say, so I would say this. So I think, so the NFL as an institution, I think it has partnerships or ties to big pharma.
Oh, yes.
Which kind of connects opioids and other things, right? You not understand that. I don't have to go there.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the reasons why they've instituted independent concussion doctors now on the sidelines.
There you go. So, but on the flip side of that, I know cannabis. I love to use cannabis for adverse behavior. You know what I mean by adverse behavior?
No. Explain it. Yeah.
So when I was an athlete, let's say anytime I was a receiver, anytime I ran a slant and I hurt my knee, anytime I went back to run that slant again, I'll be a little bit hesitant, right? A little bit worried in my head. But when I use it, we kind of throw that away, right? Forget about it. Now I can just go back to that 100% drill and run that slant. You understand what I mean by that correctly? So I think that's cool. I think that's good. I think it's good for the athletes. But on the flip side, you can't use every time stuff doesn't go your way, every time you have a bad game, every time you and the teammates are not on the same page. So, I see cannabis being good in the NFL, but if we don't use a regulation around it, especially for the young rookies that get in and just have the funds, just like we utilize with finance, with revenue, right? We teach them the class, et cetera. Same thing with cannabis on my end. And on top of that, when LeBron James gets a CBD deal, what do you think the little kids are going to say, Josh? Hey, Mom, I can use LeBron James does. They don't understand terpenes. They don't understand CBDN, CBDG, not yet. But they're going to say, Mom, LeBron James uses or Tom Brady uses. So I wonder how we're going to kind of, that's why I don't let it smoke you. I wonder how we're going to kind of, structure that out into a way that's kind of healthy for the league to use, for the athletes to use on a consistent basis, and how it's going to trickle into effect into the community and other places that are inspired sports.
Right. And you and I have talked about this. It's about education and enlightenment. And parenting is the toughest job any of us have ever had. It just is. Talk to any parent, they will say, and by the way, just because you have adult children does not mean you stop parenting. It's just a different chapter in the journey of life. Okay. And to me, educating the parents so that they can speak from experience and knowledge when they talk to their children about adult activities. And I'm talking about sex, drugs, and, well, it's not rock and roll, but it's certainly sex, drugs, and alcohol. Right. And I'll put alcohol as a drug. OK, because I think really and truly, a lot of people think alcohol is more closer to the poison than it is a plant medicine.
Yeah.
Well said.
And are we ever going to get to the point where we're not going to refer to the cannabis plant as a drug, but more as a medicine? And by the way, there were songs in the 60s by Jefferson Airplane about the drugs that mama will give you don't do nothing at all. That was the line in the song. Josh, I think you remember that song, don't you?
No.
Oh, man. God. All right. It's Jefferson Airplane's fault, you know.
Yeah.
Go ask Alice. That's the name of the song. Anyway, the point is, it comes down to education. Tarris, you and I have talked about this. You and I would love to go to parent-teacher organizations and events at night and talk to them and educate those groups about how best to talk to your kids about these awkward subjects for parents, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I don't know if you have any children. How would you bring up your children around this new environment of states that have legal cannabis, legal CBD, access to alcohol? And by the way, well, if you want to talk about it, I talked about it with the sociologist the other day. I really think that the drinking age has to come down to 18. It has to come down to 18 at the same time as those 18-year-olds have to give a year of service to their country. Because when corporal punishment was taken away from parenting because it's an assault, we figured out that timeouts don't work. Okay? It just doesn't work. Sure, there are consequences. Take away your phone, take away your computer. But those are communication devices. You don't want to do that for your kid. You need to enlighten and explain to your kid what this product does to a child's brain versus an adult's brain.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And are we ever going to get there, Tarris? I know that you spoke to one group.
Yeah.
Are other people in Washington State athletics searching you out to come talk to their teams now about the legalities of cannabis and don't let it smoke you, right? Don't let it consume you, right?
Absolutely. I've spoke to a few places, a few organizations out in Seattle. I would love to speak to more, especially high school, college level. But I think you have to be bold, right? For the first time, cannabis is growing hand in hand with humans, right? Another cannabinoid is coming out literally daily. And first time, the will of people is over legislation, right? Everybody wants cannabis to be legal, but the will of people are like, it's legal, right? So I think you have to be bold is the first thing when you're talking to your kids, right? Second thing, I think I would say really research the companies who've been doing this for like 5 to 10 years, right? Not companies who's just starting now, who's just trying to jump on the bandwagon. Really the pioneers, the people who've seen this coming. Really check out what those companies doing, check out what they're saying about different cannabinoids, terpenes, et cetera. And then the last thing, whether you're 18 and just starting or whether you're 55 and just starting, I would say start low and go slow.
That's right.
The amount and go slow, right? So those would be my 3 points for sure, what I would tell someone, and hopefully that's helpful.
But more importantly, it's about reading books like yours, reading books like Steve D'Angelo's Cannabis Manifesto, reading books like Bruce Barkart's Weed the People. Those are the books that I now have consumed, and it has impacted my feelings about my use of the plant. And, I'm not a wake and baker, certainly not Monday through Friday anyway. I definitely have more of an on the clock, off the clock mentality. And it's because when I get off the clock, it's when my chronic pain starts to rear its ugly head into my brain again. Mm-hmm. So I need to balance those transmitters in my brain that are saying, holy crap, you can't walk because your right hip is bone on bone. Right? This is what goes through my mind. So is the moral of your story, too much of a good thing can be bad?
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. And to use it, learn to use it the right way, responsibly, starting low and going slow. And more importantly, ask your parents, don't be afraid to talk about this, because at least now the first thing, and Josh, I don't even know how old you are, but I was in the 60s and 70s, and always the first thing is you don't want to do that because it's against the law, right? That was the thing. You're going to get caught. You're going to go to jail. It's against the law. Okay. So you walk into the woods and you do it and nobody sees you and you get away with it because mom and dad told you not to do it. And as a child or a teenager, anything your parents are telling you not to do, like touch the hot stove when you're a kid, you're going to touch that hot stove to find out, what does that hot mean? What is this? What does this plant do? You know, and I always bring up the Robitussin thing, because when I was a kid, Robitussin was the go-to cough medicine. Now you have to show your 21 ID because the kids have figured out you can get buzzed off Robitussin. The kids are always going to find out the angles. We're always worried about them. Yeah, because we're keeping education from them. Why are there fewer alcoholics in Europe than they are in the United States? Josh, do you know the answer?
For the same reason that people in Amsterdam don't use cannabis, is once you take that away from them, they're not going to go after it for, they're always going to rubber band. They're going to do opposite of what you say and then fling towards what's wrong or bad or whatever. It's just the way that kids are.
It's the way kids are. So whenever I hear those comments, and by the way, do you know how many kids' lives have been saved or prolonged through cannabis medicinal practices?
Mm-hmm.
It's ask Mara Gordon about that, right? Aunt Zelda there. You can save your child's life by using cannabis if they have those certain things that we all recognize that the plant has impact on. And I'm talking about seizures, epilepsy. I'm talking about MS. I'm talking about Crohn's disease. These are all things that the research has shown that this plant can help.
Including longevity. We had Lofa Tatupu, a previous Seahawk player in the NFL, who said
Mosey's kid, as we like to call him here in the New England area, okay? Because his dad was a freaking legend, all right?
Him and I are the same age, and yet his athleticism is unreal. And he said that he would still be able to play if cannabis was legal. The CBD that he takes has increased his longevity and everything about him, ability to play with his kids, all the way to throwing a football, his torn pectoral muscle, everything is healed. And so I'm curious what your opinion is on the longevity of using cannabis in sports. If you think people would be playing longer and being older and just enjoying life more if it were allowed in sports arenas like the NFL.
Absolutely. It would make everything better. I think you would see less spontaneous acts on the field. Just being honest, I think you would see a whole culture shift around cannabis for sure. Even off the field situations that kind of go on, with certain things, with people getting in trouble, car accidents, all type of stuff. I think all that stuff was said.
We mentioned CETE. That Antonio Brown thing was really disturbing, and how people were just criticizing him taking his pads off and walking off the field. That wasn't the actions of a normal person. That was the actions of somebody who had been hit in the head one too many times. And there's videos where you can really probably figure out the exact person who hit him at the exact moment that created that CTE. But all of that aside, when you see folks like that, I think we need to be a lot more empathetic and maybe reach out and have them use cannabinoids like CBD or anything else for those ailments. It's really kind of an issue mentally and physically that I think if we normalize it, it will become allowed a lot sooner.
Right. Tarris, did you have a concussion?
I did not.
Wow. See, I got one in a car accident. It still impacts me 3 years later. So, the brain is still a fascinating organ in all of us. And it can do a lot. It controls a lot of things, and that endocannabinoid system that balances those neurotransmitters in our brain. That's the sweet spot. That's the Garden of Eden for the plant, right? So anyway, hey, Tarris, how do people get your book? Because I know how to get it.
Yeah. So you can go on Amazon, type in "Don't Let It Smoke You." It should pop up. I would love for you to leave a review too. If you check it out, you like it, if it resonates with you, please leave a review. That's very helpful.
Where do you want me to review you? Because like
Amazon.
On Amazon, yeah.
Amazon, I had a little issue with Amazon earlier today. Let's not go into that.
That's okay.
That being said, I will write you a great review. Okay, I promise you that, because I couldn't put it down. Granted, it was a thin book. Okay, my kind of book, about 110 pages. All right, but I was able to identify with exactly how this substance played a role in your upbringing and where it is now.
For sure. And hopefully the book helps so others can kind of navigate that through their life and be able to move forward.
There you go. All right, Tarris Batiste, it's great to talk with you live on this show. I look forward to chit-chatting with you more. Josh Kincaid, again, thank you for being there, and look forward to next week's show, because it's really going to be you and the scientists. So make sure you get plenty of textbook time on some of those chemistry books and genetics, because they're going to be talking about research and really and truly, you know, and Tarris, I don't know how you feel about this. I joke about this. When I'm gone, I'm leaving my body to science with a list of all the things that I put in it and how often, you know, and then they can study. They'll have some live tissue that they can study. Anyway, so Tarris Batiste, thank you so much. Josh Kincaid, great. Dan French, our director. Isabel Turner, our production coordinator. For everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. And as Tarris says, start low and go slow. See you later.
With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.